So what age should a child date, and how do you know when they're ready for that? That question really can't be answered unless you know the answer to two other questions. Those are, what is the goal of dating, and when is your child ready to meet that goal? So I can only tell you what we did with our children, what we learned after having 9 children, and hopefully that will help you. We were a family that read this book, I Kissed Dating Goodbye by Josh Harris. And we also read some other books, but I want to kind of go through what we thought was good in the things that we learned and things that we thought weren't so good. What I will say is one thing that was good is I appreciated the concepts in the book, but I did not think that the applications worked very well. And unfortunately, a lot of people have taken the fact that the applications didn't work well, and so they've thrown the baby out with the bathwater. And that would include Josh Harris, the author himself. He even threw out Christianity, which is pretty disturbing. But just because somebody does that doesn't mean the concepts were bad in the first place. And so I want to go over the concepts, not just that were in the book, but just the things that we learned generally through the process of raising our 9 children. And hopefully those things will help you with this question about when dating is appropriate for your children. So I'm basically going to talk about 6 points that I believe are concepts that if you teach your children, you probably will have a good outcome, especially if they take them to mind and heart. Number 1 is teach maturity. One of the things that we wanted our children to know, whether it be about dating or any other decisions that they're making in their lives, is the concept of maturity. We define maturity as understanding how your present decisions will affect your distant future and acting on that knowledge in a responsible way. So we wanted them to think about what they do right now, what's that going to mean for their future, and we want them to kind of have a mindset of thinking that way. Number 2, think with your mind and not with your heart. Something that I know really worked well and we wanted our children to also do, no matter what it was about, whether it be about dating or other things, is to recognize not to allow your emotions to rule your life. We wanted to instill the concept that you don't follow your heart, which the world tends to push at this point. Because as the scriptures say, the heart is deceitful above all things. So you don't want to follow something that's deceitful. Instead, we wanted them to use their wisdom and their mind and think through things logically and think through things with wisdom before they make decisions. One thing we definitely tried to teach was never make a big life decision while in a state of high emotion. Number 3, understand that relationships always move. Another concept that worked well was to explain how relationships never stay stagnant. They either move closer together or further apart, and this happens from moment to moment as well as over time. And if you think about it, it happens with all relationships, and that includes romantic relationships. So if you think about the relationship between a parent and child, say, the more close you get, it's because you're having more intimate conversations, and the more of that you do, the closer you become, and that's moment to moment over time, as well as the more arguments you have or the more things you disagree on, the further and further apart you become. That happens with all relationships, including romantic ones. So we wanted them to have the concept of maturity, understanding how your present decisions will affect your distant future, and acting on that knowledge in a responsible way, along with the understanding that relationships always move. So then if they think about that, when they start that relationship, they can think right away, where's this relationship going to go? And if you think about it with a boyfriend-girlfriend relationship, there's only 2 options for that relationship to end up. They're either going to break up or they're going to get married. So thinking about that, when they're 12, 13, or 14 years old, 15 years old, their relationship's going to keep moving. And is it going to move towards marriage? Are you ready to say that this person might be somebody that you're going to marry? Or are you ready to say, I'm going to break up with that person eventually? Then what's the point of all the drama that's going to go on in their life? Thinking about it logically, it doesn't seem to make sense to do that too early. Then we want to talk about number 4, understand how sexual relationships develop. Knowing that relationships always move. And then thinking about maturity. If I start a relationship now, Where's it going to be in a month, a year, 2 years, 5 years from now? If you start at 12, 13, or 14, 1 year from now it's going to be tops 15 or 16 years old. And if that relationship is always moving, where's it going to move to? Is it going to move to break up, or is it going to move to get married? And if it's going to move to get married, are you ready to get married at 15, 16, 17 years old? Probably not. Do you want to break up with a person? Not necessarily, because that always causes a lot of drama. So think about it logically. Doesn't seem to make sense so far in the logic that we've talked about to get involved in romantic relationships at 12, 13, 14, 15, 16 years old. But when we're talking about understanding how sexual relationships develop, that's one thing that's different between a boyfriend and girlfriend relationship versus the other relationships you have. Because the boyfriend or girlfriend relationship is the relationship that would be romantic and that would start moving physically. Remember, relationships always move, so it's going to move forward physically. That's not true with your friend. That's not true with your mom or dad or your siblings or your teacher or other relationships that you have. If those are appropriate relationships, there's not going to be a forward going with a physical relationship. That only happens in romantic relationships. So generally, teens aren't ready to move forward in a physical relationship, and not only the physical aspects of it, but also the emotional aspects of a sexual relationship. Because eventually, it's going to move into a sexual relationship if it keeps moving forward. That's just a matter of logic. That's just a matter of human nature. Now, that's not to say some children can't go out and date at 15, 16 years old and not become sexually active before they're 18 or 19 years old. But generally, what that would mean is they keep having relationships and breakups, relationships and breakups, relationships and breakups. Sometimes they do have sexual relationships in that too, but if they don't, they're either going to probably break up or they're going to continue forward with that physical relationship. And so that's why a lot of times you're going to see middle school, especially, or high school, there's just a lot of drama that goes on with romantic relationships. So now going back to thinking again about our first couple concepts with maturity and with understanding how relationships move and now understanding how the sexual relationship develops, does it really make sense to get into dating relationships when you're that young? Not really. Doesn't seem to me. So then if a young person isn't getting involved in a romantic relationship, we would move to number 5, use youth wisely. Something that's really good to explain to your kids, what we explained to our children, was that youth is a very unique time in your life. Most of your life, you won't be a youth. Most of your life, you're going to be an adult, you're going to be an older person. The only time that you have where you're not bogged down and burdened with adult responsibilities is during your youth. When you are under 18 years old, when you don't have to pay your mortgage, when you don't have to necessarily have a full-time job, you don't have to support yourself yet, you can use that time in a unique way that you can't use it later. It's not going to be the same. There are certain freedoms that come with adulthood, but there are other freedoms that come with being a child. Some of those freedoms are that you can use that time to develop friendships, advance your education, and find ways to serve others without the burdens of having to have those adult responsibilities. So since you have that freedom at this point, and since relationships always move, what would be the point of trying to put romantic relationships and the burden of all of the emotions and all that go with it? Why put that into your youth when you're not really ready to handle it emotionally and physically, and when it's going to cause a lot of drama? Wouldn't it be wiser, thinking of maturity, wouldn't it be wiser to put that off until you're older? It seems to me that it would, and that's why we taught that to our children. That's better left for when you're an adult. Any of our children who decided to go with our guidelines, we didn't have that issue as they were growing up. They didn't start dating till they were adults, and as adults, they already have that maturity that they need to make those wise decisions. Now, that doesn't mean that everything went perfectly and all things were always well. We made mistakes and they made mistakes here and there, and that always happens. So let's look at those first two questions. What's the goal of dating, and when is my child ready to meet that goal? And that would be number 6, the goal of dating. In our family, we wanted their goal to be to find someone who has the character that would make a good marriage partner. And the purpose of that date is to learn the character of that person and to see whether or not marriage might be in the future. So what that would mean is we don't want them to go out with somebody just because they look good or they're good looking or whatever. We want them to go out with somebody that they are attracted to, of course, but that has the character that would make a good marriage partner. And if you think of it, most teens barely are able to conceive of all of these things in a mature way, but certainly not until they're late high school or in college or beyond high school anyway. So in other words, after we thought about all this logic, what we decided was it was best to tell our children that it's wise to wait till adulthood. And before that, it wasn't in their best interest and would likely lead to a lot of unnecessary drama. So far, that worked well for us. The 3 children so far that we have that have married have chosen really good marriage partners that have good character, and we're really happy with that. And we have 6 more to go if they all get married, and we hope that they will do the same. So the end result here, in my view, is the goal of dating is to find someone to marry, and it isn't reasonable to start that process until you're within a year or 2 of actually making the commitment of marriage. So if you're younger than that, it's probably not a wise time in their life to get into that. I know that isn't the normal thing. A lot of people are saying date earlier. Not wise, in my view. I hope this video has given you something to think about, something to talk with your husband or wife about, something to talk with your children about, so that you can make a wise decision for your own family. And I hope that if you liked it, you will hit the like button and subscribe. And I hope to see you here next week. Parents, you can do this. Thanks for watching.